It's time now to bring you the very latest on the tropics, as it is 10 minutes before the hour, and we do want you to know that we have been watching, of course, Hurricane Linda. We have some good news for you, and that is that the system is moving away, so it is a less likelihood for the tropics. As we show you what's going on with Linda, we have the latest advisory now from the National Hurricane Center. This is as of 2 o'clock this morning, Pacific Daylight Time. It centers the storm at 760 miles south-southwest of San Diego, California, with winds down to 80 miles an hour. Now, it is moving west to northwest at 13, and there you see the lowest central pressure, the estimated lowest central pressure, 975 millibars. You remember how quickly Linda accelerated when it was strengthening? Well, we are happy to say that it started to weaken just as quickly. Within a matter of 24 hours, the system went from a very small and intense, a very weak hurricane from a Category 1 to almost a Category 5 within 24 hours. And it looks as though Linda has weakened just as rapidly, with winds again now of only 80 miles an hour. It is moving to the west-northwest, and its forward momentum about 13 miles an hour, so it's moving very quickly. And that means that it has an even better chance that it will move into the cooler waters and start to weaken even more so as it moves away from Mexico, away from Southern California. So here is Hurricane Linda in respect to California. You do notice some higher clouds building in the southern parts of the Golden State, but at least we do not anticipate the whole system to move northward. No tropical storm force winds expected for the southern parts of California, and none of that deep tropical moisture moving into the southern parts of the Golden State either. So any way you slice it, it's good news that our hurricane continues to move off toward the west. Here's another system. As you see, the spiraling of clouds here, a little convection associated with it. But this is our newly formed tropical storm. Its name is Marty, with winds of 40 miles an hour. It's pretty much stationary, hasn't moved much, doesn't have much in the way of forward momentum. It is centered about 1375 miles southeast of Hilo, Hawaii, the big island of Hawaii, right about here. It's a long ways away, and again, it's pretty much stationary, and it's just a tropical storm with winds of 40 miles an hour. We'll continue to watch Marty for you, but it is a long ways away from the Hawaiian Islands. If you have interest over the islands, not to worry, not to be too threatened by this tropical storm for now. Let's keep going a little farther west as we show you what's going on in the West Pacific here. We have two systems that we are watching for you. This is Oliva. You know, we've been talking about Oliva as it moved across the southern parts of Japan here with very gusty winds and a lot of tropical moisture with it. And we're also watching this next system now as it approaches the northern Mariana Islands in the West Pacific. We have been watching this system, and it's a typhoon, Typhoon David. It will increase in strength as it heads to the northwest and west toward Iwo Jima within the next 72 hours. So all eyes are focused on Typhoon David and, of course, minimal Typhoon Oliva as it moves toward the west, toward Kyushu, the southern tip of Japan. So a little bit more active across the Pacific Basin than what we've been dealing with over the Atlantic Basin. Another look at the Atlantic Basin here as we've been watching Erika. It's moving away. Other than Erika, we don't have too much going on. We have been watching some convection here over the Bahamas and more convection here of the northeastern Caribbean islands. This has not organized into a tropical system or anything. We'll continue to watch it. Just some squally weather over the Bahamas, but not a tropical system by any means. And again, Erika continues to move away. Here's the latest on Erika as it moves to the east-northeast away from the U.S. mainland. We'll talk more coming up next.
Is also affecting the United States by providing a little bit more moisture to the southwestern corner. You can see on our water vapor imagery loop right here, some of the mid and upper level moisture that is now streaming into Southern California. Yesterday it helped enhance some of the monsoonal flow, bringing 2 inches of rain in just 1 hour in Yuma, Arizona. We also had reports of almost 1 inch in San Bernardino, California, and in Riverside about a ½ inch. So you can see how Linda is affecting the United States with the possibility of rain, and that scenario will continue for this afternoon. And Linda is also forecast to continue to move away from the United States. And you can see that rather dramatically here, pushing off to the west on Tropical Storm Marty. And Marty is weakening significantly, and you can see here how the convection is really dying down and almost disappearing, and Marty may actually lose vapor imagery loop. You can see the wave right here. It's interacting with an area of low pressure in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and when it is doing that, it is causing some very strong thunderstorms and very heavy downpours. We have flash flood watches in effect for southern, eastern, southeastern, and also interior Puerto Rico, with small stream advisories for the possibility of flooding for the Virgin Islands. At this time, it does not look like this is going to be developing any further, at least within the next 24 hours. As long as it is this close to this upper level low, we're not anticipating it to develop. Farther in the Atlantic, we're still watching Erika. You can see the latest position on Erika. It will be affecting the Azores within the next day with very strong gusty winds, possibly up to tropical storm force winds, again in the next 24 hours. Now here's
Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
time now for your tropical update, and let's start with Tropical Storm Linda. That's a bit of a change. Downgraded now from a hurricane, as maximum sustained winds are now down to 65 miles an hour. And here you can see Linda, now located 865 miles to the west of Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. And movement continues to the west-northwest at 12 miles an hour, now moving away from the United States. Still, though, we do have heavy surf advisories in effect, especially for the south-facing beaches along Southern California. We're looking for some large swells over the next day or so. Actually, the advisories are through tomorrow morning. Checking out our water vapor imagery loop, you can see how some of the mid and high level moisture from Linda has been streaming across the southwestern portion of the United States, helping kick up some strong to heavy downpours yesterday in Arizona and also in Southern California, with San Bernardino picking up about 1 inch of rain. And more rain is in the forecast for today, with flash flood watches in effect for the deserts of California, also Arizona, Nevada, and the southern half of Utah, as we do expect the moisture from Linda to interact with the monsoonal flow. And that all means we're going to see the possibility of heavy rain, especially right here in the desert areas. So Linda is heading up to the northwest, moving away from the United States. Still watching in an area of convection here for possible development south of Acapulco, and possibly could become our next tropical depression, but still not enough organization with that to warrant a tropical depression. Still have Tropical Storm Marty, and you can see first of all what is still still left of Linda and Tropical Storm Marty, with maximum sustained winds at 40 miles an hour, and Marty holding fairly stationary, and really not too much organization with that, although a bit of a flare-up of convection today, still a tropical storm. A couple of typhoons. First, this one is Typhoon David, with maximum sustained winds at 110 miles an hour, moving to the west-northwest at about 10 miles an hour, and within the next 72 hours should come to the north of Iwo Jima. Also watching Typhoon Oliva continuing to head up to the north and expected to take a little bit more of a jog to the northeast. And Oliva is packing winds of about 75 miles an hour and is expected to bring some heavy rains to Kyushu and the southern half of Japan. To the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, where we're seeing some rain, tropical moisture in the southern portion of Florida, but no tropical characteristics, nothing organized here, just very heavy rainfall for Dade County. Fairly quiet, as you can see, in the Caribbean until we come across one tropical wave here, and that has been dumping some heavy rainfall earlier in Puerto Rico and also just to the east of San Juan, and has the ability of dropping about 4 more inches of rain, so there are flash flood watches in effect for the Virgin Islands and also for Puerto Rico. It's interacting with an area of low pressure in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and that's helping stir up the convection, but no further development at this time is expected. Here goes Erika heading up to the east. Already we have tropical storm force winds reported in the western portions of the Azores in Flores Island. Now here's Marshall.
Coming up, the latest
convection there blowing off to the west in this milky shaded area you see here. Lots of African dust, and again we tend to see that periodically during the tropical season. A visible satellite view, and you can see it's showing us that tropical type of cloud field with the bands of clouds, although we're really getting to the point now where this is just a huge swirl of low pressure, lots of low cloud cover, some high cloud cover as you saw peeling off here, and then we work our way a little bit farther to the west and we run into some of that marine layer cloudiness, the stratocumulus cloud.
Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
This tropical update is brought to you by Rayovac.
We come before you here on this middle day in September. The most remarkable thing about the tropics is the lack of activity out in the Atlantic. We've gone right through the heart of the hurricane season from the end of July through August into the middle of September. We've had just one hurricane out in the Atlantic, no other depressions, no other tropical storms. So the activity has been in the Pacific, and here's Linda. We had a bit of a scare early over the weekend for fear this hurricane might come into Southern California as a tropical storm. It hasn't done that at all. It is moving on toward the west. It is weakening very rapidly. The top winds are down to 60 miles an hour. Most of the moisture is departing. It is streaming up toward Southern California and northern New Mexico, and we'll detail that when we show you the radar here at the top of the hour. Also, we have some high surf up there on the southward facing beaches, and remember that surf was generated several days ago when this was a powerful hurricane. It takes it a few days to get up that 700 or 800 miles, and it's arriving on the beaches today 8 to 12 feet with some sets perhaps 10 to 14 feet. And here we can see we have very few deep white clouds around the center as the tropical storm moves straight off to the west. So this is going to die out over the cooler waters. It's not all that cold, mind you. The temperatures are about 75 degrees, but that is really too cool to support a hurricane or a tropical storm. So much for Linda. Now we do have another disturbance developing here south of Acapulco, and it's a massive circulation. We feel pretty sure this is going to develop into a tropical depression, very likely later on a tropical storm also. We're going to have to follow that very closely. We could well have a tropical storm there certainly in another day or so. Marty here is having a very tough time to survive. It was a tropical storm. Now it's been reduced to depression. Not moving very much at all. It doesn't quite seem to know where it wants to go. Centered at 12 north, 136 west, nearly stationary. And looking at visible satellite pictures, circulation is completely exposed to the southeast, so it might dissipate entirely. In any case, it's not going to do anything very soon. Now, this is a David. This is a typhoon. typhoon, top winds over 100 miles an hour, moving towards the northwest, and we still have Oliva here. Oliva is just barely a typhoon now, top winds 75 miles an hour, kind of drifting up along the coast of Japan and sort of move inland, we think, over Kyushu and affect some of Honshu as a weakening system, but very heavy rains there in Japan are going to be the main trouble, and the more so since this is a kind of a lingering storm. It's not moving very rapidly, so the rain is going to have a lot of time to come down. Now, as we turn to the Atlantic, we'll look at the upper winds, and we see we have a trough still in the Gulf of Mexico. That's pretty much going to eliminate any development there, we should think. Another trough out here through Puerto Rico. We have a tropical wave interacting with that and stirring up quite a few showers. And we even have a trough out here in the eastern Atlantic. So the bottom line is in the Atlantic that even though we see a couple areas of disturbed weather, which we'll detail now, we don't see anything that offers a threat. In the Gulf of Mexico, because of that trough, we can see the clouds streaming off to the east here at upper levels, and that confirms to us that we do have strong southwest winds in the upper levels, and that is not a condition where we would expect anything to develop. On out east of there, though, in the Bahamas, we have a little bit of a ridge of high pressure, and we are seeing quite a concentration of showers through the Florida Straits and over the Bahamas, but the pressures are relatively high there. They're not falling, and we're not seeing anything there that we think is about to develop anytime soon. Meanwhile, Erika still with us, top wind 60 miles an hour. It's begun to move a little faster now toward the northeast at about 16. They've had some pretty strong winds, as a matter of fact, in the Azores today. Flores Island reported 75. And at Lodge's Air Base, we have noticed that the winds there have gusted to over 50 miles an hour. And we can see the satellite picture here, and it is staying actually very remarkably intact. I think we have a bit of a glitch in the picture as it moves on off to the east. Now, as far as the rest of the Caribbean...
Linda, as of 8 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, now down to 50 miles an hour top wind speed, and it is moving west at 9 miles an hour. So the storm continues to degenerate into just a swirl of clouds with some gusty winds, and over the next few days is likely to just sort of spin itself out. It's centered about 850 miles southwest of San Diego, but it is still having an effect on both the coast and inland. Here's what it looks like. You can see we do have that low-level circulation still going, and at the upper levels, that's streaming out of moisture heading toward San Diego and in towards Southern California and then over toward Arizona. The swirl has also generated a fairly hefty sea set of waves heading in all directions, and we'll have more on what's going on as far as the surf in Southern California coming up here at the top of the hour, but it has been a very rough surf day in Southern California. Now, as we open up the view a little bit, here you can see Linda heading out into the Pacific. Our next storm trying to organize itself. It hasn't been declared a tropical depression yet, but we do have some circulation going on in this area, and it could become a tropical depression here over the next day or two. Now, there is another tropical depression out in the eastern Pacific, and that would be Marty. That's this right here. Not very powerful at all. In fact, it's just about stationary now and very weak. How weak? Well, top winds 30 miles an hour. That's not a very powerful storm at all. And look at the motion, nearly stationary. West-southwest at, count them, 1 mile an hour, centered about 1,350 miles east-southeast of Hilo, and really will, in all likelihood, just dissipate here over the next day or two. Now, there are some powerful storms in the Pacific. Where are they, though? In the central, or actually the western Pacific. Let's go over there. This is Typhoon David, a very potent storm. Top winds now over 100 miles an hour. It's heading north of the Marianas, it looks like, and over the next 3 days is heading in toward the island of Chichijima. There's another storm. This is Typhoon Oliva, which a while back started out pretty far to the east. It started out way here in the central Pacific and tracked all the way across northern Marianas and then headed up in towards southern Japan, where it is bringing some very heavy rains and some winds now, top winds right around hurricane force, about 75 miles an hour. Let's come back to the Atlantic now, actually into the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. No real development going on, very quiet time. Erika, you might remember, now no longer Erika, declared extratropical, and it is way, way out heading toward Ireland. over about the next 4 days, heading up toward the British Isles. We do have a ridge here over Cuba and then a trough over the eastern Caribbean. That's keeping things pretty